It is episode 126 of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliette Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. This past week, it was 19 hours of Fox News. Again, I planned for 15. Things went wrong. What were those things that went wrong? A crazed narcissist with sociopathic tendencies decided to call in on Fox and Friends just out of nowhere. And then he also did an impromptu press conference full of lies. And I kind of felt like I needed to cover that. And that was extra. So that's why it was 19 and not 15. And next week is the DNC, which it's going to be fun. I'm still working on Project 2025 too as well. But anyway, let's just get started. Here we go. Fox News is so scared, it is trying to Swift Boat Tim Walz. Here's the clip.
I'm just going to say primetime tonight, Tim Walz, Stolen Valor, 8 o'clock.
Now, J.D. Vance is saying this is a case of stolen valor.
It is stolen valor.
He has not addressed this charge of stolen valor. Up next, more reaction to the stolen valor accusation against Walz. Coming up.
A stolen valor investigation.
If he would have went to Iraq, he'd still be hiding under his desk over there.
Tim Walz is facing serious accusation of stolen valor as he touts his military service on the campaign trail.
Walz ignored a reporter's question on this stolen valor accusation.
Tim Walz, apparently we have a case of apparent stolen valor. He's lied about his rank. He's lied about his combat experience. Apparently he quit on his platoon.
The Tim Walz stolen valor controversy made serious allegations of stolen valor.
Wait, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. Stolen valor, not that bad.
The Walls are closing in on Kamala's running mate's stolen valor scandal.
But the reason why it's like people in the military care is because almost all the cases of stolen valor are in the military.
Tim Walz is facing some serious accusations of bailing on his unit before being deployed to Iraq and stealing valor when he falsely claimed that he carried weapons in combat.
We have Johnny Joey Jones, Kennedy, Lou Perez, Tyrus. We're going to talk more about stolen valor.
All right, how dare you?
Stolen valor, I'm sorry.
Come on.
Yeah.
Other soldiers who served with Walz have come out to defend his service, saying he was a great soldier and these accusations of stolen valor are absurd.
So that last clip is from The Story with Martha McCallum, which happened to be hosted by Shannon Breen last week. And the only reason I have that is because Donald J. Trump's crazed press conference bled over into the beginning of that program. So The Story with Martha McCallum. And that the NPR did a great fact check. There's a couple things I would have added to it, but it's really difficult because he does lie as often as he breathes. They did a fact check of the entire thing that was 194 items that they said were either misleading, exaggerated, or untrue, and I would agree with them on all of them. Some of them were more like opinions. People are entitled to have an opinion, but it should be based in something, right? So it just absolute madness. Highly recommend reading that. I printed it out. It was 44 pages. It's a very big font, but still, it's a lot. And it was just that press conference was nonsense. And I heard that other media companies cut him off at some point because he's just lying. Most of it was just one big continuous lie about the election, about the economy, about inflation. One little thing he's been doing that I've noticed that's driving me crazy is he'll say this phrase, inflation hasn't been this bad since, and then he keeps changing the year. It's been, I think I've heard him say 48, 58, 52, 75, over 100. And that number just keeps changing. And he'll say, they say it's 58 years, but, and I'm like, where are you getting this? There are things that track inflation in the United States, there's more than one way to track it, but you can look this up, buddy. You can look it up. And we had a very long period of very low inflation. We did. From pretty much like the 90s onward. We were blessed. We had very low inflation. And that's part of the perception that, this has never happened before. It's been so much worse than it is now. Anyway, the ranting lies of a lunatic Yeah, Donald J. Trump. Here we go. So last week on Fox News, the network played up every hint of scandal surrounding Governor Tim Walz in an attempt to discredit and demonize him to Vox viewers. Fox News hosts also trashed Kamala Harris, brazenly promoted Donald J. Trump, and spread information about crime. The Trump 2024 campaign has been working with Chris LaCivita, one of the architects of the Swift Boat attacks used against Jim Carrey, a Democratic presidential candidate and Navy veteran who ran against George W. Bush in 2004. The Swift Boat Veterans for Truth was a 527 political group created to challenge the validity of Kerry's many awards and honors he received during the Vietnam War. Kerry angered some veterans after he made statements about the war, criticizing the U.S. government and the Pentagon. The accusations pushed by Swift Boat Veterans for Truth were false, and most of the veterans who signed the letter condemning Kerry hadn't served with him and were not present when he committed various acts for which he received military honors. LaCivita created the ads paid for by Swift Boat Veterans for Truth, which were ultimately fairly successful at tarnishing Kerry's esteemed military career. Last week, it appeared that LaCivita was trying to swift boat Governor Tim Walz, and Fox News was happy to help out. So anyone watching Fox exclusively last week might not have realized that the Ukrainian military crossed into Russia to beat back Russian troops, or that an anti-immigrant riots broke out in the UK. Nearly 60% of the coverage that I analyzed on Fox News last week was dedicated to trashing Kamala Harris and her running mate, Tim Walz. I'm not kidding. Fox did not mention the fact that the Ukrainian military entered Russia. And they did not mention the anti-immigrant riots that are kind of terrorizing the UK right now. Shows I covered last week: Fox and Friends, all 3 hours on Wednesday to get the Trump call. The 5, the Ingraham angle. America Reports on Thursday to get the Trump press conference, and The Story with Martha McCallum also to get the Trump press conference. So here we go. Tim Walz and his alleged stolen valor. Last week, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz became the latest target for the folks on Fox News. The network revived old attacks at the governor's record with the Minnesota National Guard. The term stolen valor showed up 23 times in the transcripts from last week. Fox News hosts accused Walz of abandoning his National Guard unit after they were deployed to fight in Iraq. The term stolen valor is usually used when someone fabricates or lies about their military service. The Stolen Valor Act of 2013 makes it a crime for an individual with intent to obtain money, property, or other tangible benefit fraudulently holds himself or herself out to be a recipient of. So this is a very specific definition, and these are the actual things that if you say you got and you don't have them, that is considered a crime. Here we go. Congressional Medal of Honor, a Distinguished Service Cross, a Navy Cross, an Air Force Cross, a Silver Star, a Purple Heart, a Combat Infantryman Badge, a Combat Action Badge, a Combat Medical Badge, a Combat Action Ribbon, a Combat Action Medal, or any replacement or duplicate medal for such medal as authorized by law. So that's no joke. You don't just toss around the term stolen valor as they are doing on Fox, because it's an actual crime, which he has not committed. No one's actually saying that Tim Walz did any of that. So here's a timeline of Walz's military record. And I fact-checked this with PolitiFact and Washington Post. Here we go. April 1981, Walz joined the Nebraska National Guard when he was 17. In 1996, he transferred to the Minnesota National Guard, 1st Battalion, 125th Field Artillery. February 2005, Walz submitted his paperwork to run for Congress. March 2005, Walz's unit received a warning that they might be deployed to Iraq in the next 2 years. May 2005, Walz retired from the National Guard. He submitted his paperwork for his resignation 5 to 7 months prior to his retirement. Walz served in the National Guard for 24 years. July 2005, Walz's former unit receives orders to deploy to Iraq. October 2005, unit mobilized. March 2006, unit deploys. November 2006, Walz elected to Congress. So, and again, multiple sources had the exact same timeline. It would be almost impossible for Walz to have known that he was going to be deployed when he submitted for his retirement. Also want to note that if you've spent 20 years in the National Guard, you are entitled to retirement. So he stayed an extra 4 years, and he did so because of what happened at 9/11. There are also, I don't go into this in the newsletter as much because I don't have as much room, but there were multiple veterans who served with Walz who said that he anguished over this decision because he knew if he stayed in the National Guard and they were deployed, he wouldn't be able to run for Congress, and he wanted to run for Congress. And again, he was 41 years old at this time. So this is someone who's given a lot of his life to the National Guard, went through all the steps properly to retire, and then this happens. So there were also people in these articles that said that it would be impossible because it takes too long to start the process to retire to quickly do this. And another little caveat here is the Minnesota National Guard could have said, no, sorry, we reject this. You can't retire. But they didn't. They went ahead and let it go through. So there are some discrepancies in Walz's service and statements. So Walz listed his rank on his biography on his website as retired command sergeant major. His actual rank was one rank lower, command sergeant major. Walz needed to complete additional coursework in order to claim the rank of command sergeant major. He did serve, this is where it gets tricky, as a command sergeant major for 7 months, but he has since corrected his biography to list the appropriate rank. So it just came down to he didn't take some classes, that's it, but he actually served as that, but he wasn't allowed to retire as that. So it's getting very you're splitting hairs here. Some pundits on the right have also claimed that Walz has said that he's served in Afghanistan. There's no evidence that Walz has claimed he served in Afghanistan. Walz made a statement in 2018 about carrying weapons of war. He said, he was talking about gun control, and it was a social media video, and he said he wanted weapons of war that I carried in war off the streets. Walz has since corrected his statement and said that he misspoke. That's all they've got on him. Now, there was one angry veteran who served in the Minnesota National Guard with Walz, who appeared on Fox on multiple programs, and he basically just said the same thing. He just, he's anger, he's bitter, he doesn't like Tim Walz. There have been other veterans who served with Tim Walz who have commended him and said he was wonderful and they loved him and they didn't think that he abandoned them. So good luck with trying to swift boat him. I also think it's a very different time than it was in 2004. I don't think this is going to work, but that's what they're trying to do. So Donald J. Trump is now in the phase of his campaign where he just randomly calls into Fox and Friends. And I hate it because it means I have to pick up extra hours. And oh my goodness. When I originally got the grant to do this project, I was told to cover Fox and Friends specifically because Trump calls into the show. And it was one of Trump's favorite shows. And now here we are. So this is the call. And Trump says a couple of false things about Tim Walz. I'm just going to play the clip and then break it down.
President, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
So
Thank you.
Your reaction to Governor Tim Walz joining Kamala Harris to go against you and J.D. Vance?
I would say my reaction is I can't believe it. I never thought this was going to be the one that was picked. I know him a little bit. I helped him very much during the riots because his house was surrounded by people that were waving an American flag. Doesn't sound like very bad people. And he called me, and he was very concerned, very, very concerned that it was going to get out of control. They only had one guard. I guess it was at the mansion or at his house in some form. And he called me. I said, what do you want me to do about it? I was in the White House. He said, if you would put out the word that I'm a good person. And I did. I put out the word. I said, he's a good person. I hope everything's good. And everybody put down their flags and took their flags with them. But they took their American flags and their MAGA flags and they left. It was thousands of people. And that was the first time I said, wow, that's very interesting. And he called me back and he thanked me very much. That's my only thing I ever had to do with him.
So I didn't think that was accurate, but I didn't have time when I first caught that to fully fact check it. However, I did look into it this weekend, and I found a couple different sources. Politico had a never-before published interview where the authors had interviewed Tim Walz, and they included a couple little quotes from him in a book and they decided now to go back and revisit the interview. So they had a transcript from the interview where he said he talked to Trump all the time. He frequently talked to Trump, which was interesting. And the president left out the main reason why those people with, as he described them, with American flags showed up to the governor's mansion. So during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, Walz, like many other governors, issued strict public health policies to contain the spread of the virus. And according to a recently released interview by Politico, Walz had a very different version of what Trump described as people that were waving an American flag. According to Walz, armed protesters, including members of the Proud Boys, demonstrated outside the governor's mansion the same day Trump tweeted in all caps, "Liberate Minnesota!" exclamation point on April 17th, 2020. It's not clear if the protest was already planned or if Trump directly encouraged it. Walz said that he called the White House for clarification of what Liberate Minnesota meant, but got no response. So nobody called him back on this day where there were armed protesters, members of the Proud Boys, showing up outside the governor's mansion. Now, in that interview, which I have hyperlinked in the newsletter being the written version of this podcast, you can read the whole thing where Walz describes how they had to send his then teenage son to a different location because they were worried about him, and how they had to go to a different location because they were worried about this mob outside the governor's mansion. He also said that he spoke to Trump several times, and this is what I'm going to just quote. I have no audio for this, so I'm just going to have to read it. "My relationship was based on pragmatism, understanding that it was very clear that President Trump was going to do what President Trump is going to do, and that many times what he was saying, you need to take sure you verify what was actually going to come out of that. So I took an approach that there was absolutely zero upside to engaging, rather than just trying to figure out, okay, this is going to happen. How do we respond afterward? I think that sums up how I approach this." So that is Walz speaking about Trump. And Trump also seemed to forget that he had praised Walz in the past. This is a phone call that CNN said it was an exclusive. ABC News also had it. I'm not sure which one had the exclusive, to be quite frank, having read both sources. I'll give them both credit. There you go, because I couldn't tell. Again, June 1st, 2020. This is Trump talking to governors on a phone call, and he's praising Tim Walz's handling of riots after the George Floyd protests.
I tell you, what they did in Minneapolis was incredible. They went in and dominated, and it happened immediately. Tim Walz, again, I was very happy with the last couple of days, Tim. You called up big numbers, and the big numbers knocked them out so fast it was like bowling pins.
So because the audio quality is so poor there, I'll just read it again, and this is the actual clip. "I tell you, what they did in Minneapolis was incredible. They went in and dominated, and it happened immediately. Tim Walz again, and I was very happy with the last couple of days. Tim, you called up the government, and big numbers knocked them out so fast it was like bowling pins." So that same day on Fox and Friends, later in the program, Brian Kilmeade got creative with Tim Walz's history and decided with no evidence that Walz was some sort of Manchurian candidate for China.
Same way. And he's allowed and supported a 20-year ban on all strip mining while also pushing for electric cars, which brings up China. Because China has a way to, they basically lassoed any rare earth they don't have in their own country. They go into Africa, they take it, they have children mining with spoons. So they get the rare earth, they make the batteries, and then we have this clean electric car. But if we have this clean electric car and he reaches his goals.
He goes to China a lot.
But yeah, he goes to China 30 times.
He loves it.
He loves China. Okay, loves China. That's fantastic. So maybe he wants them to benefit from this, and maybe he's one of these candidates that China had eyed early in order to gain power, to be an ally should they ascend to power. They might have a real ally in the White House.
Well, so what Brian Kilmeade said there is full of speculation and is highly misleading. So according to reporting by BBC, Walz and his wife created a business that set up annual summer educational trips to China for students. This program lasted over a decade, with Walz accompanying students to China around 30 times. Walz has also been extremely critical of China. When he was a congressman, he met with the Dalai Lama and Joshua Wong, a high-profile pro-democracy activist in Hong Kong. The Dalai Lama is considered an enemy of China, and Wong is currently incarcerated for his pro-democracy activism. Walz also strongly backed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, which imposed sanction on Chinese and Hong Kong officials for human rights abuses during the pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. Walz also co-sponsored a resolution in Congress marking the 20th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, where pro-democracy protesters were brutally crushed by the Chinese military. Hundreds, if not thousands, of protesters were killed or injured during the government response. Now, the source I used from BBC goes into great more detail about Tim Walz and his history with China and his relationship to China. He apparently used to be far more hopeful about China kind of turning a corner and not being as oppressive and towards their own people and all of that, and more hope for democracy in China than he is now. So that's a nuanced situation. And again, the BBC, they go into more detail. I can't really fit that into the newsletter or the podcast. But next up, we have the absolute most ridiculous insult or attempt to smear Tim Walz from last week. This is Laura Ingraham, who I've described as a Disney villainess without the glamour, which I think is pretty appropriate. Really, really going for it. This one did gangbusters on social media because it was so bonkers. So here we go. This is from Thursday, the Ingraham angle.
Stuck with a candidate who's been faking it for years. Just what we need. Another politician who can't manage or address a problem or a difficult situation. Maybe they'll try to get Eric Holder to fix it for him, but how weak is that? This entire ticket is a con job. America is supposed to rally for a guy because he's from rural America and served in the Guard? The man even felt the need to give the false impression about his coaching position, we learned.
To his former high school football players, he was coach. Coach.
Well, the truth, he was the assistant coach.
That's a very, very brief clip, but the comments I got on it were so freaking funny because it was all these people who played sports in high school who were like, what are you talking about? The coach is a coach. You don't say, hey, assistant coach. You don't say like, hey, second assistant coach. You just say coach. Everybody's coach. If they're a coach, they're coach. So that was pretty funny. And he never hid that. He never, it's like, like when you have a teacher's aide, do you say, hey, teacher's aide? You probably just say teacher, right? You don't think of it. Anyway, pretty funny. And I always like to, I've said this before, but Laura Ingraham reminds me of a Disney villainess, but without the glamour. So just picture like Cruella de Vil, but without the, flowing coat and the hair and the cigarette on a stick. It's just an angry woman in like a golfing outfit. Like she's going to go golfing and she's angry because you're messing up with her tea time. That's my Laura Ingraham. And then her whole, yeah, Laura Ingraham. That snide laugh she has. And then sometimes she forces it. She'll try to push something. She'll go, I can't. She'll go, I can't believe it. I'm like, yeah, I'm not buying that. Acting's actually hard, dear. It's hard. It's a difficult skill. People spend a lot of money and time and effort to get better at it, and you're not good at it. You're fake. I saw that coming a mile away. Or she'll do that with her Raymond Herrero, who gets on my last nerve, will get on there and they'll be like, I'm Raymond Herrero. And then, they get all their little cattiness in, and she'll just be like, that's hilarious, Raymond. I'm like, you're not believable. You're not believable. Anyway, so we got another Tim Walz. We got two more Tim Walz. It was like Tim Walz week. This one is from Mr. Sunshine himself, a ray of hope, a ray of light, happiness and rainbows, Stephen Miller. So this clip speaks for itself. Stephen Miller, a man who looks like an actual ghoul from the underworld. He's in his 30s. How is that possible? I don't know. that's like when the hate comes out in your face. He and Alex Jones are two men that look significantly older than they should. I'm older than Alex Jones. I'll admit that. I am older than Alex Jones. It freaks me out every time. I'm significantly older than Laura Loomer, who's a complete lunatic and a bigot and a hateful monster. And I still can't believe it. I'm like, how is that? I could be her mother. How is that possible? How is that possible? Anyway, Stephen Miller, this is from Tuesday, the Ingraham Angle. Here you go.
Yes, he's one of these lunatics that calls illegal alien criminal trespassers new Americans. When he talks about a legal pathway, what he is talking about is bringing in millions of illegal aliens with full amnesty, full government benefits, free health care. This man is a moron, he is an incompetent, he is a radical, and he is going to turn the entire Midwest into a third world state. This is a disaster for America. We have to beat this guy, and we have to beat Harris in November.
Well, radical duo. Stephen and Katie, thank you both. And up next, Jay.
So what I thought was so great about that clip is that was Stephen Miller going off of a little tiny nugget. And that nugget was that he calls illegal alien criminal trespassers, again, Stephen Miller's words, new Americans. So because he calls undocumented immigrants new Americans, Stephen Miller goes all the way to he's a radical who hates this country, just wants it overrun with, criminals. Okay, Stephen Miller. Great. I think there's a bridge somewhere that needs its troll to live underneath it and yell at people. Anyway, Stephen Miller. And it's also funny because you hear Laura Ingraham again at the end there where she's like, yeah, radical duo. Anyway, and then we move on to Jesse Waters, also Tuesday, the 5, having a complete meltdown over Tim Walz. I had too many Jesse Waters clips. This one was hard. This week and last week were hard because I could have done 3 podcasts. I had so many good clips. So this is Jesse Waters. I had to stay on theme, though. Jesse Waters just going off about Tim Walz.
Kamala Harris choked. She chose Bernie Sanders. This is Bernie Sanders right here. The squad loves this guy. Loves him. You see pictures, they're like almost undressing together. What? And she managed to pick someone who looks older than Biden. I would have gone with the younger guy, but who knows if this was even her choice. Eric Holder was running the vetting op. He chose him, probably. He's Obama's wingman. He probably was like, Kamala, you're picking Walz. Let's just lose this and get on to 28. Because this is like a sacrificial lamb pick. This is the pick you put up there to get crushed, and then so you keep your better candidates ready for the next cycle. It's also a trick pick, because this guy's not Minnesota nice. He's Minnesota nuts. Yeah. They keep saying this guy's, there's Midwestern white value. Come on, this guy's a lunatic. Sanctuary cities, driver's license for illegals, sanctuary cities for sex changes for children. And if you don't want the sex change for your kid, then the state will come take your kid away from you. This guy put tampons in boys' bathrooms. 4th grade boys' bathrooms, tampons. He wants CRT taught. He was all about toppling the Columbus statue. This guy changed the flag of the state to look more like Somalia. What is wrong with this guy? In COVID, he had a snitch line so your neighbors could rat you out if you broke his lockdown rules. This man is out of his mind. He actually went and joined the army, and then right before they deployed to Iraq, quit. And all his unit is like, whoa, bro, where'd you go? They can't stand this guy. I've never seen this guy ever try to get out of a DUI. He said he was deaf from being in the Army. And then he blew a .12. I didn't know that. And Jessica, I have to ask, why did he honeymoon in China? What? He's been to China 30 times. That's strange. I find that.
Was he there with Hunter Biden?
So half of what Jesse Waters said was completely inaccurate, but I chose that clip because it's just showing you like how many of these things can you cram in 2 minutes, because that clip was about 2 minutes, and it's like, wow, that encapsulates what we're going to hear from the Republicans until the election. So all of that nonsense. The DUI is apparently like 30 years old. He did have hearing loss from being in the National Guard. It wasn't the Army, it was the National Guard. He was in the National Guard for 24 years. Jesse Waters actually just signed up for it, which was nutty. And the tampons in boys' bathrooms, some of the comments about that were hilarious as well, from women who were like, guess what? I shared a bathroom with my brother, and I had tampons in that bathroom, and my brother's fine. It all worked out. It all worked out. Ask anybody who has children of more than, of boys and girls growing up next to each other. That's what happens. So that was pretty funny. Now, this next clip, I kind of want to make like a bumper that's just called, wow, that's really racist. Woo! And this clip, I didn't clip it because I was working on the podcast from last week when this one happened. And I went back on Twitter and went, oh my God. Wow, that's awful. That's really racist. That's really racist. That's just, I don't even know how. Wow. Here's the clip. I don't want to give it away. You probably saw it. I didn't clip it. A young woman who's phenomenal over at Media Matters clipped it because she was like on it. I wasn't paying attention because I was working on something else. But wow. Here we go. And a little clip is Harold Ford Jr., if you don't know, is a black man. So that's kind of needed context. I'm just adding because this is audio, not video. Here we go.
Is Kamala trying to copy the red MAGA hat? The Harris campaign making $1 million off of Harris Walz camel hats, which Teen Vogue calls the new quote-unquote status symbol for Democrats. Did you order your camel hat yet, or did you do something else?
I got another hat. I got White Dudes for Harris right here, and I'm not going to put it on for one reason. I don't want to mess up my hair, but two, I'm not for Harris, so I'm going to give it to you. A white dude for Harris. You are white, right? You're white. Are you half?
I'll give it to my father-in-law.
Okay. You wear that. You wear that, Harold. I give this as a gift.
Thank you.
And you put it on your beautiful head.
I appreciate that. Red, white,
you
and
won't
blue.
wear it, so you're not a Harris supporter.
I am.
You're not going to mess up your hair. Look at it.
I'm a huge.
Come on, Harold. Put the hat on.
Your Honor, what are your thoughts about Jesse's hat and his camo hat?
So just to recap, wow, that was racist. Jesse Waters took a hat that said "White Dudes for Harris" on the front of it, and he shoved it in the face of a black man and said, "Hey, put that on your head. You want to mess up your hair or something? Aren't you half white? Ha ha, come on, put it on your head. Put it on your head." And then Harold Ford Jr. tried to diplomatically dodge, say, "I'll give it to my father-in-law." Harold Ford Jr. is married to a white woman. Both of Harold Ford Jr.'s parents are black. He's not of mixed race. He just happens to have a lighter complexion. It's a rainbow coalition. Just like white people have different complexions, black people have different complexions. It doesn't mean anything. If he's clearly a black man, like I was just like, oh my, what are you doing? Wow, that was racist. Wow, that was racist. Wow, that was racist. Okay, I feel like before I play the next clip, I have two more, but the next clip's very, very short. I should give a shout out to my sponsor. And who might that sponsor be? Well, it's not a billionaire writing me a check. It's not a corporation giving me some type of grant or foundation. No, it is hundreds of subscribers to my Substack channel and to my Patreon account. And those paid subscribers and paid supporters get exclusive content. Right now, it is all the work I'm doing on Project 2025. They get kind of an early look, and then I wait a couple weeks, and then I open it up to a larger audience. But if you want to see it first, if you want to pounce on it, they also get a larger edit with more detail about Project 2025 that I'm offering to a general audience. So that's another thing that you get. And that changes. Sometimes I do different things for the paid subscribers that are exclusives. But and it's $5 a month. If you can't afford to become a paid subscriber or paid supporter, share the podcast, share the newsletter. And I also I brought it back because people asked about it. The Amazon wish list for Decoding Fox News. The only thing on it are treats for Odin and Thor. They are locked in my bathroom right now because they're going crazy today, knocking everything over, attacking things. And I use the treats, I'm not kidding, to try to calm them down because it usually works. I'm like, here's some treats, leave me alone. But today they're on fire. Don't worry, they love the bathroom. I call it New York's hottest club because when I go in to check on them, they're just hanging out. They don't even try to leave. They're just like, what up? It's New York's hottest club. Anyway, when I had cats before, they hated when I locked them in the bathroom. Sometimes you have to do it. I have a one-room apartment. I have no choice. There's no other room to lock them in. So sometimes to keep them away from something, I have to put them in the bathroom. And my old cats would just meow, meow, meow. And these two are like, awesome. We're hanging out. We're hanging out. We're doing a thing. We're Odin and Thor because they're very funny cats. Anyway, so that's it. That's my paid for my sponsor message. Moving on. Judge Jeanine sums up perfectly while your fox-loving uncle thinks we have a crime wave right now. Here we go.
But we're told that crime is down under the Biden administration and on their watch.
It is not down. People are not recording crime. They're not reporting crime. Police are not making arrests. They're not being called. They know if you call a cop in some cities, you're lucky if they show up within 24 hours.
See how they twist reality? And how can you disprove what she just said? Because she's just making stuff up. It's like a negative. You can't disprove a negative. Nobody's calling the cops. Oh, wait, I'll do it. Okay. I'm Judge Jeanine, and nobody's calling the cops anymore. Why? Because they don't show up. And if they don't show up, then there's more crime. And nobody knows about it because nobody's calling the cops. It's all a big scam. Okay, there you go. Now, next up, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There you go. See, when you just make up reality, you can just tell people whatever you want. This one is a favorite. This is a Fox guest goes rogue. These are rare. These are rare little gems. Now, this one was Representative Jake Auchincloss from Massachusetts. He's a Democrat. They invited him on Fox and Friends on Thursday. Lawrence Jones is interviewing him. And they were going to discuss Cori Bush's loss in the latest primary in District 1 in Missouri. And that's St. Louis City and some of the northern suburbs of St. Louis. Now, my sister has a criminal defense practice in St. Louis City, St. Louis County. She knows Wesley Bell, the person who beat Cori Bush. So there's a lot of backstory with St. Louis and high crime and a lot of problems with St. Louis City. It's also stuck in a deeply red state that almost seems to resent it. Crazy gun laws. There's a lot going on with Missouri. There's a lot going on with that seat. So Fox didn't include any of that, though. They just tried to make it about one issue, which I think is not accurate. But anyway, this is Representative Jake Auchincloss turning the tables on Lawrence Jones.
Morning. My interpretation of this election is that voters in the heartland chose a career prosecutor who supports law and order and wanted to invest in infrastructure. And that's exactly what's going to happen in November as well when they vote for Kamala Harris, which is why Donald Trump has gone into meltdown mode these last few weeks.
I just want to point out that he turned the tables on Jones in seconds. Well played, Auchincloss.
I know you want to focus on Donald Trump, and I promise I'll invite you to talk about him. He is the Republican nominee. But when you see what's happening in your party, there is clearly a pro-Israel sector of the party standing with our most trusted ally. But then there's another side that tends to stand with the Palestinian cause. Some of them even sing some of the quotes of Hamas. So as a representative, one was just defeated. Another one was a defeated Jamal Bowman in New York. And the next one is Ilhan Omar, who's up. How do you feel about that?
The Democratic Party is a pro-Israel party. And you see that with Joe Biden, the leader of the party, the most pro-Israel president since Harry Truman. You see that with Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of the party in the House, Chuck Schumer, the leader of the party in the Senate. Yes, there are outlier candidates who have been vigorously anti-Israel. They don't speak for the mainstream Democratic Party. The difference on the other side of the aisle is that the anti-Ukraine forces in the Republican Party do speak for the Republican Party. What was once Ronald Reagan's Republican Party that stood for the forces of freedom and democracy in Europe are now supplicating themselves to Vladimir Putin, led by Donald Trump.
Yeah, I get it. I get the talking points of wanting to pivot to Republicans. Last time I checked, though, all the funding has been going to Ukraine by the Republicans as well. I'm just curious of how this is going to define the party going forward. It looks like your voters, even Democrats, are rejecting these type of candidates. I don't think they're outliers. I think there's more. And when you look at Michigan and those uncommitted voters, I just wonder if the Democratic Party will continue to stand with Israel or will they capitulate to those people. Congressman, I always appreciate you coming on. I promise you the next time I'll give you some time to talk about Donald Trump.
So yeah, I did think it's funny. If you look at the transcript, and this is a common pattern with Lawrence Jones, he talks more than the person he's interviewing. He does this all the time. He'll talk over them. He thinks a strong argument is to like raise his voice and start yelling over them. It's pretty bad. But I just thought Auchincloss was very skilled at how he navigated him. And yet he was very subtle. You know, he didn't have some of the politicians, I know this from watching like the House congressional hearings, they're really fun to watch because you see the skill that these seasoned politicians have in that some of them are very charismatic, you know, and they have these personalities that bounce right off the camera. I can think of Jasmine Crockett in Texas. You know, you cannot stop watching her. She's so entertaining. She's so big and over the top. Some are just like that. They just know how to weave in and out and deal with somebody who's in a hostile situation like that and how to answer a question artfully, which I think he did a very good job there. And yet he's just, you know, this unassuming kind of soft-spoken man. So anyway, next up we have stories Fox News ignored. Every week I compare the hours I've watched on Fox to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. The following list are stories that PBS covered that Fox News did not. Here's the big one. Updates in the war in Ukraine. The Ukrainian military entered Russia near the Kursk region with the use of armored fighting vehicles donated by the United States and its European partners. This was the largest incursion since the start of the war. The Biden administration issued no objection. In reaction to the incursion, Russia declared a federal emergency. Russian missiles hit a shopping mall in the Donetsk region, killing 14 and injuring 44. State emergency service personnel dismantled 76 tons of building structures at the worksite. Updates in the Israel-Hamas war. An Israeli military raid in the occupied West Bank killed at least 11 Palestinians. The IDF and police said that they were armed militants, some of which had thrown explosive devices at them. Others in the surrounding area were injured. Turkey formally asked to join South Africa in its genocide lawsuit in the United Nations against Israel. Spain, Mexico, Colombia, Nicaragua, and Libya have also asked to join the case. The requests are still pending. An Israeli airstrike hit 2 schools near Gaza City that were sheltering civilians, killing at least 93. The IDF said that Hamas was using the schools as command centers. Witnesses said there was no advance warning of the attack. Israeli issued evacuation orders for Khan Yunis in Gaza. Tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians fled the area to a newly created humanitarian zone. Northern Israel continues to be hit by a barrage of explosive-laden drones from Hezbollah in Lebanon. Meanwhile, the IDF said it carried out a series of airstrikes in southern Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah sites and operatives. Moving on to the rest of the news, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh resigned and fled the country amid violent protests fueled by students who were frustrated with what they believed was a corrupt system that favored the elite. Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus is the current head of the interim government. Yunus accepted the role after being approached by student leaders. The interim government is expected to announce new elections soon, although no specific timeline has been given. Cardinal Sean O'Malley resigned as the Archbishop of Boston. O'Malley was the main advisor to the Pope during the sex abuse scandal in the diocese. O'Malley was appointed by St. John Paul III to take over at the height of the clergy sexual abuse scandal. O'Malley will be replaced by the Bishop of Providence, Rhode Island, Richard Henning. He's just resigning, by the way, due to old age. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas failed to disclose more private jet trips he took with the Republican megadonor Harlan Crow in 2010. Soon after President Joe Biden announced he would not seek re-election and Vice President Kamala Harris said she would run for president, Robert Kennedy Jr. took a massive nosedive in the polls. Kennedy at one point was polling as high as 20%. is now averaging 5.5% nationally, according to the Real Clear average. Right-wing anti-immigrant riots broke out in the UK, where over 100 police officers were injured. The violence followed a violent knife attack on a dance studio where 3 young girls were murdered and 5 children and 2 adults were injured. Online influencers falsely claimed the suspect was a Muslim asylum seeker, which spurred attacks by the far right and neo-Nazis who targeted immigrants. PBS produced a segment about mothers who are competing in the Olympics. Past Olympiad athlete Allison Felix teamed up with Pampers to create a nursery in the Olympic Village to help mothers care for their young children while they competed. Boeing officials testified at a National Transportation Safety Board hearing about the 737 MAX door plug blowout. Boeing factory workers say they were pressured to work too fast and asked to perform jobs that they weren't qualified for, including opening and closing the door plug that later blew off of an Alaska Airlines jet. Bloomberg Philanthropies announced a $600 million gift to historically black medical schools. Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science, Howard University College of Medicine, Meharry Medical College, and Morehouse School of Medicine. Seed funding will also be given to support the creation of the Xavier Ochsner College of Medicine, a new medical school in New Orleans. PBS produced a segment about how some Michigan voters are still concerned about the situation in Gaza. The mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, said that Kamala Harris's nomination for president has cracked the door open in terms of his support for her candidacy. According to a report by the Society of Family Planning, abortions increased in the first 3 months of the year after the Dobbs decision that outlawed or limited abortions in several states across the country. This increase in numbers is driven by abortions provided via telehealth. Last week marked the 50th anniversary of Nixon's resignation due to the Watergate scandal. Last week also marked the 10th anniversary of the death of Michael Brown Jr. at the hands of police in Ferguson, Missouri. Brown's death helped bring national attention to the Black Lives Matter movement and the issue of police brutality. A rioter who attacked a police officer with poles during the January 6th riot at the Capitol was sentenced to 20 years. David Nicholas Dempsey's sentence is among the longest among hundreds of Capitol riot prosecutions. And moving on, all of those stories were not included at Fox, to By the Numbers. Every week, I compare the top 5 topics on Fox to the top 5 topics on PBS. And here we go. Fox News, number 1 topic, Kamala bashing, 31%. Tim Walz bashing, 29%. So that is 60% of airtime. 60% of airtime, just based on bashing those 2 people. These were not intelligent segments. It was just, they bring up their name and it was just one big, huge complaint about them. Next up, 13% was just Trump 2020-24. And when Fox does Trump 2024, they're just blatantly promoting the candidate. 4% was dedicated to the Trump assassination attempt. And 3%, believe it or not, and this is mainly from the legit news programs I happen to pick up, 3% were just kind of neutral, talking about Kamala Harris's campaign. They do actually do that sometimes, 3%. PBS NewsHour, top 5 topics. Number 1, Harris versus Trump. That's just how I call the presidential race, 15%. Kamala Harris, 2024. Again, they're just talking about the candidacy. In this case, most of it was about her pick as Tim Walz to be her VP. That was 10%. 10% Israel-Hamas war. 7% extreme weather. And 6% Olympics. 7% for extreme weather was more than one event. I now just call that an umbrella term for extreme weather because there tends to be a lot of them in the summer. So that was more than just Hurricane Debbie, although Hurricane Debbie did dominate that category. Now we're going to move on to words used on Fox for the week ending August 11th, 2024. Trump topped the list at 424. Kamala at 344. Biden, a surprising 252. Border, 130. Israel, 117. Tim Walz, 108. Economy, 99. Progressive, 61. Radical, 60. China, 56. Crime, 47. Iran, 44. Stolen valor, 23. Communist, Marxist, or Socialist, 23. Ukraine, 14. Cori Bush, 11. Hunter, 7. AOC, 5. I also just want to add that I included Trump's crazy press conference into this mix that was also in the transcript, in addition to his phone call into Fox and Friends. If it's on Fox, I include it. If it's a show that I watched, I include it. It doesn't matter what it is. So that kind of skewed, I think, border, definitely, and probably crime made those numbers a little bit higher. So that's it for the podcast. I can let the cats out of the bathroom. Don't worry, it's New York's hottest club. They actually like hanging out in the bathroom. It's weird, but they do. They are strange cats. Odin and Thor are total weirdos. They're best friends. They love hanging out together. They love tearing after each other in the apartment, just do, zoomies all day long, which is why I had to put them in the bathroom. They are not harmed. They will be, I will open the door and they won't come out. I trust you. Trust me on this. They're wacky cats. They're like this little weird society that I don't quite understand because they're not litter mates, but they were raised together in a shelter. They are from the same colony. Anyway, it's a lot of information about my cats. It's a lot. They both have big ears. I just want to say briefly, thank you so much for making Decoding Fox News a crowdsource-based media project. If I worked for corporate media, they wouldn't let me do the charts. They wouldn't let me do my nerdy, these are the stories that Fox News ignored. It would be pithy, short, 300-word articles about, Fox, which is fine. I totally get that. That is out there. And tip of the hat to people who write those short. That's actually very challenging to write shorter stuff and to constantly churn it out every day. That's very hard. I instead write monster-sized, super nerdy, granular, very data heavy. I try to make it data heavy, research heavy newsletters. And I get feedback all the time from people who actually like that. And this is niche media. I don't have to appeal to millions of people. I just have to appeal to a crowd that likes super nerdy analytical analysis of Fox News. I kind of said the same thing there twice. Analytical analysis. Anyway, I'm losing it. I'm tired. If you'd like to become a paid subscriber to Decoding Fox News, you go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News, Patreon for Decoding Fox News. Subscriptions start at $5. You get exclusive content. I also have the Amazon wish list for the cats if you want to buy them treats, because people like doing that before. And that's it. You can find my work on Twitter, Threads, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I think I got them all. Blue Sky. I'm exhausted. I won't be on social media this week because I'm still working on Project 2025. You can also find a version of this podcast, basically the same thing, on the YouTube channel for Resolute Square. Some people like to listen to podcasts on YouTube. Not, whatever floats your boat, go for it. So they just help me promote. That's about it. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you at the next podcast, which will be the DNC. It should be lit. Thank you so much.
Resolute Square.